Other news, there are growing questions about the fintech company Arbitrade, which is hoping to set up on the island. Arbitrade had said it would donate $1 million to the government to help pay for a fintech incubator space in Hamilton. With the money promised to arrive by the end of last week, there's been no confirmation this money has come through. There's also worries about the man who founded the company, Troy Hogg, who appears to have a checkered business background. We're joined now by our business correspondent, Tony Waterman, and from the government, National Security Minister Wayne Keynes.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, certainly this company has been grabbing a lot of headlines over the past couple of weeks. A lot because of what they've come out in a conference call to say. So, Minister, thank you for joining us to help us kind of understand the situation a bit better. Let's just take it in line items. One of the things that the company said that it would be doing is giving $1 million donation for this fintech incubator. Has that money come through?
First things first, the government has set up the FinTech Development Fund. The fund is still going through the legislative process, and once the fund is set up in accordance to law, then we will be in a position where we can accept donations. So there have been no donations to this fund because the fund is absolutely still being set up.
When will that be set up?
It'll be the not too distant future. As you can imagine, there are things such as it's going through the Senate. It now has to go for the royal assent. So it will be in the not too distant future.
Has the company talked to you about this donation, saying that they were going to give you this money?
I think there were initial conversations, but let's be clear. What the government does is when we go on roadshows, we talk to a number of people. We say, listen, this government is looking to set up an opportunity for people to invest in Bermuda. We have the highest standards of KYC and AML. Companies are happy to make donations to government, but the government said, before we accept any money from anyone, we're going to put together a fintech development fund that allows us to be transparent. It allows us to set up the rubric for people could invest into it. The fund has not been set up yet, and there is not $1 in that fund. And when the time is appropriate, we'll let the stakeholders know that is indeed available for investment.
Shadow Minister for National Security, Michael Dunkley, said last week that this was akin to a bribe, taking this money to put into the fund, almost hinting that this would be in exchange for the company getting approval to set up on island and do business here. Do you see it that way?
I think we must not stray from the facts. There is the ICO legislation and the Digital Asset Business Act, and that governs each and every step of the process. So what you see is that the company Arbitrade, they went through due diligence. They went through the first step of the process. Now, as it relates to the business that they're doing in Bermuda, well, this is stage one. Stage one is being vetted. They went through the vetting. They were vetted by the Bermuda Monetary Authority. They looked at the company. They were able to question them, and they were given the initial part of their incorporation. But that's just where things begin. Whatever they want to do in Bermuda now, with reference to an ICO or creating a business, the second part of it comes into play, and that is when we look at specifically the ICO legislation and the Digital Asset Business Act. And so what we're seeing is this is a beautiful thing. We have put in the necessary elements in place to look at to look at a company. And the first part, they were successful in getting through the initial phase. So they looked at the company, they talked to 3 of its directors, and now is the challenging part, where all companies coming to Bermuda, we must go through the due diligence phase. We look at their white papers. We look at how they're going to raise money, where the source of funds is coming from, and that, we believe, is the process that we're going through now.
What does it look like at this point?
What it looks like now is that they've gone through the first step.
But when you start looking at this company, I mean, just doing simple Google searches is going to bring up some red flags about the founder, Troy Hogg. Have you met him personally?
I have met Troy Hogg, but let's go back to the beginning. This company was able to go to an independent financial regulator, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, that have been doing this for a number of years. They had significant players, 3 directors that met with the BMA, and they were able to go through their vetting process. The vetting process is independent from the government. I cannot speak to that process, but what I can tell you, at the end of the process that is controlled, that is run, that is independent by the Bermuda Monetary Authority, they were given permission to incorporate. But that's only the first part. We've heard claims of what they're going to be doing in the future, how they're going to be conducting themselves in business. Stop. There is still the regulatory process for them to go to for conducting business. And so if they want to go into Bermuda, whatever business that they want to do, it's still the next step of KYC. They still have to say what they want to do. There still has to be vetted. They still have to be given the opportunity to say what their business for. And I'm not saying they will be, but they can be told yes or they can be told no, but that's based on their business plan. That's based on their white paper. So
But they must be pretty confident that they're going to get this approval because they're going through the process of buying Victoria Hall, which is a $6.5 million property that's been on the market. That needs to get approval from the government for the outside company to come in and buy that property.
Let's be clear. There is nothing that can be further from the truth. The government has been clear at all stages that the AML and the KYC is the most important thing to the government. And so we know that they have made public claims, and that is for Arbitrade to answer to. We're speaking to specifically how the process goes. The process goes now is every element of their business plan must now be vetted. It must go through a specific process, and that has not taken place as yet.
The company claims that they've been on island some 10 times, that they've met with the premier, that they've met with ministers. Is this true? Have you guys been meeting with them?
We have met with them. Now remember, when you are having conversations and you're going to phase, when you're going to meetings abroad, you're meeting with a number of companies, and that is fine. There is a clear place when you want to do business or set up a company in Bermuda. Again, it is not based on a conversation. It is based on the rubric that is set out in the ICO legislation and in the Digital Asset Business Act. So it's not based on a relationship. It is independent of personality. It is total and separate, and that is a process that they will indeed go through, that they're at the start of that process. I think if we could criticize them for anything, we can criticize Arbitrade, and likely so, for being exuberant, telling the world what they wanted to do in Bermuda, telling them how they wanted to donate money in Bermuda, how they plan to change the world. Let's put that aside. That has very little with how the government sees this. The government is excited for anyone to come to Bermuda and set up the company. However, we have specific steps that every company must go through, and they are going through that process.
Have they been given any indication, though? Because I go back to the buying of this property, the promised donations. Sure. I've reached out to the charities.
Sure.
Not only have they not received the money, but they haven't even heard from this company.
Let's go back, and I want to make it crystal clear. The government has a fintech development fund.
Mm-hmm.
Every dollar, every penny has to be accounted for in the fintech development fund. That fund is still being set up. I cannot speak to any claims.
But when it comes to buying the $6.5 million
Yes.
Victoria Hall property,
Yes. Speaking specifically to the Victoria Hall property, that is a process that's in train.
Have they gotten the sign off from
They have not
the premier?
gotten. They have not gotten sign off from that. And let's be clear. The government is not in the business of speaking to business endeavors that are in train. Let's go back to the original conversation. They have not received permission to buy the building yet. They have not been given permission to conduct any business affairs yet in Bermuda. That is a part and governed by the ICO legislation and the Digital Asset Business Act. We believe that, Ms. Waterman, we believe that not only is this going to benefit Arbitrade, we have a global standard as being a blue chip jurisdiction. We're not going to do anything to jeopardize our status. And whilst we see this as an opportunity to inform the public, to inform our stakeholders that, listen, you can say whatever you like. And we are opening up our doors for people to come and look at Bermuda. But what we will not compromise is the integrity of our jurisdiction, and we will not compromise our KYC, Know Your Customer, and the AML process.
But when you do start digging into this company, when you look to find this Scion FZE company that's based in Dubai, there's no clear website. It's haven't received any confirmation from the Dubai Gold and Commodities Exchanges whether or not this company is a licensed trader. When you look in the Scotia International of Nevada, which is supposedly the parent company, you call there and they're aware of this, but they direct you to somebody who's not picking up their phone. Does this not raise some red flags?
Let's go back to the process. The process is that, let's go back to the process. The process is the vetting, and the AML is done by an independent authority, that is the Bermuda Monetary Authority. They have done the advanced vetting on this stage, and they have given them the ability to incorporate the company. With reference to what they want to do in Bermuda, they have not gone through the next stage, which is to set forth their business plan as to what they will do. That process still has to take place. So there is a possibility that we will look at every element of that business through their business plan, through their white paper, and make a decision whether or not they'll be given the opportunity to have an ICO raise, given the opportunity to set up an exchange.
Have you looked at the white paper?
We have not looked at the ICO. We have not looked at the white paper, and I'm going to go to again so we're clear. This is going to be set up in accordance with the ICO legislation and with the Digital Asset Business Act. It sets out specific elements of how a business is governed. At the appropriate time, the FinTech Advisory Committee, it's an independent body that will look at this and make the decision whether or not they get the thumbs up or the thumbs down with reference to commencing business services in Bermuda.
Okay, so when it comes to the building, which they said was going to be closing when they had the conference call in the 2 weeks from there, they've not received permission.
Let me tell you what
They've not sent the $1 million. They've not sent the money to the charity.
Let's go back for a second and say this with the greatest of respect. This is a company that is going through an ongoing due diligence process.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to put a timeline on a process. What I am saying is that the process has prescribed elements of it, and they're going through this process. And so what I do not want to do is paint this in a negative light. There is a process. There
Mm-hmm.
are specific timelines. As the timelines go through, then we will check the box and move forward. There's not necessarily anything nefarious about the stage that we're going through. It is indeed a process.
Since this has come out and has raised so many eyebrows, have you spoken to any of the representatives from the company in the last week and a half to say,
the
guys.
The reality of it is that I'm going to go through it again. There is a KYC and an AML process that is independent of the government.
But clearly you're here tonight because you want to clear up some of the
I think
questions that are swirling around this company.
I think it's important for us to understand where we are as a country generally. This week I had the privilege of being in France, and we had the opportunity to talk to regulators from France and Germany and England, and we showed them what we were doing in Bermuda. It's very important that we work through this process to make sure that the standards are high. We believe that this process will vindicate itself. We believe that making the press statements in advance, saying what they're going to do, we believe, and we say this respectfully, this was a misstep. But now that the misstep has been made by Arbitrade, we believe that the process will vindicate itself, because at every stage, built into the legislation is the accurate KYC and the AML that we believe will continue to allow us to vet companies, no matter who they are, and get the best opportunities for Bermuda to protect our global reputation and to make sure that we continue to be the blue chip jurisdiction that has enjoyed a stellar reputation for over 50 years.
All right, well, we're going to be following this right along with you. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. Minister for National Security there, Wayne Keynes. Diane, back to you.
Tony, Minister, thank you very much. Stay blessed.